What's your take on this at scale? What this means for China? What this means for its economy?
Yeah, nice to see you, Emily. It means that China's zero COVID policy is coming apart at the seams. You saw Q4 of 2021, the growth rate for Chinese economy was about 4%. That's not as high as they wanted. This year, they think they're going to grow at 5.5%, but if they keep having these extreme lockdowns, and I thought Alan's story was harrowing, I don't think you achieve those kinds of growth rates. We know lots of American firms who are delivering food to their employees for exactly that reason. And of course, it just hits all of the supply chains again.
The lockdowns, the road closures, they're affecting factories as well. Tesla and Volkswagen, for instance, they've suspended work at factories there. Do you see this having a long-term impact on China's ability to attract global businesses, global manufacturing?
Yeah, maybe not in the long term, but certainly in the medium term. It's very hard to run a business in China if every couple of months it's going to get shut down again. You talked about the factories. Shanghai Disneyland is closed again. Foxconn, Unimicron, Eson, all of these suppliers to big American tech firms are once again shut down, which makes it really hard. And I think it just accelerates the tech decoupling you see already, with Western firms increasingly saying, well, maybe we should look to the rest of Asia, or we should diversify not entirely away from China, but we need to hedge our bets a little bit. And I think this is going to accelerate that trend.
There's already been a lot of pressure on Chinese tech companies because of the crackdown by the Chinese government on tech companies in particular. We've seen the Chinese government perhaps trying to dial some of that back, saying they're going to give U.S. regulators more information about these companies. But do you see this having a more sustained impact on China's tech world and its competitiveness?
It does. It has a huge impact, but not just the lockdowns. It's sort of everything is swinging in the direction of decoupling. I mean, you saw these huge crackdowns on Chinese tech last year. You and I talked about them, delisting people, telling people they can't do business in the United States under certain circumstances. And then, of course, it's coming from the US too. You mentioned the new SEC rule, which basically says, if you're a Chinese company, you got to follow US accounting principles. They've got 3 years now to comply. But other than that, if you don't comply, we're going to delist you. So you just see this trend happening in every direction. And I think, Emily, it will continue.
Now, we still haven't seen a distinct steer from China and its position on Russia. And of course, China is under a lot of pressure from the international community. What do you expect to happen there? And how do you expect that to influence the U.S. relationship with China and China's relationship with the rest of the world?
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's been really interesting to see, because I think Xi Jinping and his team were surprised by how brutal and gruesome Putin's invasion of Ukraine has been. And there was vacillating for a week or two. Now the politics of China has come out solidly in favor of Russia. If you look at what's censored on the Chinese internet, anything pro-Ukraine is censored and taken down immediately. All of the Russian propaganda gets through. So on the political side, they're with the Russians. On the business side, not so much. I mean, so far, we've heard anecdotally that all of the big Chinese tech firms are complying with Western sanctions on China, as are the big Chinese banks, even though their government is saying, hey, you should be doing what you can to support the Russians. I mean, a perfect example is Didi, the big taxi service, the sort of Uber of China, announced right away they were closing in Russia. And then after pressure from the Chinese government, they started back up their Russian operations.
So what do you think this means quickly for the longer term then? Is it status quo for China's relationship with the rest of the world? Or could we see a shift?
Yeah, I think China will stay just below the level where they're going to be subject to secondary sanctions from the US and Europe. And so they'll keep playing this game. They'll probably buy a little bit more oil from Russia. They'll try to help their Russian friends as much as possible without really running afoul with what the rest of the world wants. Because if you remember, Emily, this is the year that Xi Jinping wants to be voted the forever leader of China. So he needs things to be fairly calm, at least until the fall.